All right, welcome everyone. Today we've got an absolutely fascinating explainer lined up for you. We're going to unpack the cinematic English film, The Fallacy of Extremism, the Barzakian Balance. It's a really deep dive into the intellectual and psychological trap of ghulu, which is the Arabic term for extremism. And more importantly, it explores exactly how we can escape that trap to find what they call dynamic perfection. So get comfortable because we're about to completely rethink how we look at the whole idea of balance. Okay, let's dive into this. Meet Salem and Jaces. Like a lot of us lately, they are totally lost in this disorienting, high-contrast cyber desert of modern knowledge. I mean, it's overwhelming, right? You've got glaring lights, harsh shadows, just an absolute flood of data. And this desert is actually a perfect visual for the trap of extremes. Because when we try to navigate the vast ocean of information today without a solid internal compass, we end up just wandering aimlessly back and forth between opposing poles. We get reactive, we get exhausted, and ultimately we just stay lost. So our journey today is all about figuring out how to guide Salem, and honestly ourselves, right out of this desert.
So here is our cognitive map for the explainer today. We're going to move through 5 key concepts: the anatomy of bias, the illusion of conflict, the Barzakian alternative, wasatiyya as a mountain summit, and finally, achieving full consciousness. Sound good? Let's get right into it. Chapter 1. The anatomy of bias. The film breaks down what it calls the rule of 4. These are essentially the 4 massive cognitive fallacies that totally corrupt human thinking. First up is desire, just blindly following your inner feelings without looking for any documented proof. Second is identity, prioritizing your specific tribe or your sense of belonging over objective truth. Third is upbringing, which is basically rejecting facts just because they don't fit the environment you were raised in. And fourth is authority and interest, twisting your own logic just to serve material wealth or power. Now, honestly, we've probably all been guilty of at least one of these before our morning coffee, right? But the film makes a crucial point here. Bias isn't just some harmless logical error. It's actually a severe psychological defect, and frankly, an immoral act against the truth. Now listen to this quote. "The mind closes before the tool works." Wow, that is a massive warning sign. It's telling us that a simple ignorance of facts isn't actually our biggest problem as humans. Our biggest problem is that those 4 biases we just talked about, they act like a virus. They completely shut down our cognitive tools before any real critical analysis can even begin. Moving right along to Chapter 2, the illusion of conflict. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is how we historically treat these 2 major forces in human life. We treat them like they're totally opposing weights on a scale. Over on the left side, you have the Western bodily intellect. That leans super hard into pure materialism, focusing entirely on the senses and worldly reason, while basically completely neglecting the human spirit. Then, over on the right, you've got the Eastern spirit intellect. That leans way over into pure spirituality, focusing deeply on silent meditation and dissolving into the whole, but in the process, severely neglecting the physical body and worldly life. This creates what the film calls the yin-yang of existence. The tragedy is, we've bought into the false illusion that these 2 sides are in a permanent state of war. And because we see these forces as enemies, we end up trapped in what's known as the pendulum of reaction. You see, extremism isn't static. It's this violent, constant swing between materialism and spirituality. Think about it. When a society gets sick of pure, soulless materialism, it violently swings all the way over to isolated monastic spirituality. And then when that obviously fails to build a functioning society, it violently swings right back. It's a relentless cycle of just reacting to the opposite pole, and it completely prevents us from ever finding true, grounded stability. Which brings us to the antidote. Chapter 3, the Barzakian alternative. So you might be wondering, what exactly is a Barzak? Well, it's a 3rd state that's created by the active interaction of 2 opposing poles. But here is the absolutely crucial point. It differs from those original poles in kind, not just in degree. We're not talking about some weak, watered-down compromise here. Think of it like chemistry. Hydrogen and oxygen are 2 different gases, right? But when they interact, they create water. That water is a Barzak. It is a completely new, emergent, interactive state of being. So if we apply this to our illusion of conflict, we get the true yin-yang of existence. The body and the spirit aren't enemies at all. They're actually meant to be interactive partners. The Arabic Barzakian approach explains this perfectly through the concept of daily prayer. True prayer isn't just checking out and doing some spiritual meditation. It actively requires bodily rhythms, standing, bowing, prostrating, while simultaneously maintaining complete, absolute spiritual presence. Neither side is erased. Instead, they interact to create this beautiful unity of witnessing.
All right, Chapter 4, Wasatya, the mountain summit. And this brilliantly illustrates what we mean. This is Wasatya. As the scholar John Hoover points out in his research, moderation in this classical framework is not just finding a mathematical midpoint and hiding out safely in some flat valley between two extremes. No way. It is the actual summit of a towering mountain. It towers high above both extremes of that swinging pendulum. And because it's at the summit, it can see what neither isolated pole can see on its own. It's a position of incredible, elevated strength.
And the crazy thing is, this Barzakian Wasatiyya manifests literally everywhere. In theology, the divine names serve as an active barzakh connecting the divine essence to our physical world. In our everyday human conduct, it's the summit between hiding away in isolated monasticism and just giving in to unchecked libertinism. And when it comes to knowledge, it sits perfectly above both the blind imitation of the past and the ungrounded excessive rationalism of the present. It applies to the whole shebang without ever erasing or dominating either pole.
Which brings us to our final section, Chapter 5, Achieving Full Consciousness. The film points to the prophetic biography as the ultimate living embodiment of the barzakh. While extremism demands that you either ignore the material world entirely or you immerse yourself in matter and totally ignore the spirit, the prophetic model does something amazing. It balances both perfectly. It demands complete engagement with the real world, trade, family, leadership, while at the exact same time maintaining flawless spiritual presence and ethics. It's this perfect interaction that actually builds full dynamic human consciousness. Let this quote really sink in for a second. Breaking the barzakh is a departure from the path of full consciousness and the corruption of humanity mentally and emotionally. Basically, aligning yourself with any one extreme partisan camp literally destroys your consciousness. And that's why becoming a non-aligned human, someone who is committed only to the truth and this barzakhian balance, rather than just cheering for a tribal camp, is an absolute rational necessity if we want to hold on to our humanity. And so we've finally returned to Salem. By rejecting the traps of the cyber desert and actively climbing that barzakhian path of Wasatiyya, he actually reaches the dynamic summit. He finally escapes the exhausting pendulum and becomes a luminous being of integrated light. He hasn't rejected the world, but he hasn't lost his soul to it either. He's found that dynamic perfection.
So, as we wrap up, when you look at your own beliefs, how you react to the news, your daily habits, I want to ask you, are you violently swinging on that pendulum of extremes? Or are you striving for the dynamic summit of integrated light? It's absolutely a question worth asking yourself every single day. Thank you so much for hanging out and exploring this with me. Keep striving for that summit, and I'll see you in the next explainer.